Hello and welcome back to Speedrun, the fast-talking video game podcast where I am feeling in the mood for more Dreamcast. Jazzie, how about you?
You didn't do the intro. Hi, I'm Jazzie.
Hi. And joining us once again is the one and only Adam.
Yeah, I'm still here. They kept me around. Thanks, I appreciate it.
I was going to say, we talked last episode, Adam doesn't want the one and only. He wants the mediocre intro.
That's
so how are you going to introduce in a mediocre?
I want the... This SNL host was the mediocre one that we could only bring in because they're plugging a movie or something level, like not that we actually wanted them, we just kind of needed somebody this week. That's what I am. That's what I want you to think of me as.
The one and only John C. Reilly.
There you go. He's available.
Yeah.
He lives nearby. Bring him in.
So welcome back to Speedrun. We met this one cool guy while in a socially distanced bar playing Dreamcast in the corner on a diver Dreamcast. What's his name? Jonathan Adam Koralik. There he is.
There he is. So today we're talking about a subject very near and dear to my heart. If only because it's and by near and dear to my heart, I mean it's a mild obsession. I should probably seek help. And that is Dreamcast Homebrew. So diving right into it, starting a timer. Adam, you've covered this rather extensively. I feel like most times whenever there's a major new homebrew release, you will cover this on your channel.
Yep, absolutely. Although I do it with some parameters, but yeah.
For example, it has to be a proper disc-based release, not just a burned disc, right?
Right. So let me break that down into three little categories, because the independent Dreamcast scene has people who make games and then they're just like, here, I made a game, this is fun, I'll release the file digitally. There's like a bajillion of those. I don't cover those because it's just, you have to draw the line somewhere. Otherwise you'd be making videos all day about like tiny little indie games that no one else has heard of. Mm-hmm. Then you have like the second tier where there's people who do that, but they also take the time to be like, I want to put it on a disc and publish it, but I don't have the money and no publisher picked it up, so I'm going to burn it on a CDR. Maybe I'll make some home art on my printer or whatever, and then try to sell it that way. I admire that to the extent of like, hey, you tried, but I can't, you got to draw the line, because you're just basically a CDR. Like, I could have burned your game and done that myself, and I feel like that's, just, there has to be a border somewhere. So then the next step up is like when they have pressed, discs made in factories, usually in Germany, and then they get like full-on artwork and covers, and they're, sealed in cellophane wrap and sold in stores. Those I will cover.
And basically, if I remember right, I think you've explained this on your channel before, but with Dreamcast Homebrew, after around 07 or so, Sega basically gave it their blessing?
Not exactly. Here, do you want me to just do the elevator pitch history for this?
Yes.
Please.
Okay, so the Dreamcast had three abilities it could read three different disc formats. One would be the actual Dreamcast games, which were called GD-ROMs. One is music CDs, which were a version of CD-ROMs. And then it had this third thing that was basically never really used called Mill CD, which was basically a music CD with an extra line of data in it that was mostly intended for like Japanese karaoke purposes. It wasn't really, so like you could buy a music CD that would have this and you'd get like extra visualizations. Like there was really nothing else intended for it. However, eventually people realized, well, you can't rip normal Dreamcast games, you can't burn normal Dreamcast games, but what you can do is if you hack your console well enough, you can at least extract the data. Once you have the data on a computer, you can kind of reconfigure it and force it to play through the Mill CD exploit. That's a very long story, but that's the short version. So once they did that, they realized like, oh, you can actually make entire games built around this exploit. And so that's essentially what happens now. The thing with Sega, though, is that they don't really care. Like, their official position is basically like, we don't see what's happening over there. I can tell you unofficially they think it's awesome, but they can't have anything to do with it. The final official Dreamcast release was in 2007. It's a game called Karos, or Crows is the rough translation. It's a shoot-'em-up game. But the indie scene that first started publishing discs started all the way in 2003 with a game called Feet of Fury, which was basically like it's sounds disingenuous to call it a DDR clone, but that's kind of what it was. It supported the Dreamcast. It supported the Dreamcast dance mat, and it was, the exact right type of game at that time because DDR was so popular. And the Dreamcast did have 2 DDR games, but they were Japan only. So anyway, it started there, and then more and more people were getting on board with this because you essentially had an open platform that was easy to develop for, that was common enough that people actually owned Dreamcasts. Discs are cheap to produce, not only from a production standpoint, but also just like the logistics of actually getting a disc pressed and like put onto a store shelf somewhere. And of course, ultimately, the parent company, Sega, didn't care. They weren't trying to stop you. They weren't trying to take a cut of your royalties. They just didn't want anything to do with it. They were like, you're on your own, have fun. So that kind of that combination of factors really led to the birth of the Dreamcast indie scene, coupled with the fact that my buddy Shane, Re-Res TV, he's another YouTuber, he always kind of says it best. He says the thing with the Dreamcast, the reason people love it is because it died in its prime. Most consoles die because they're bad. The Dreamcast died when it was amazing and no one could understand why. The simple answer is economics. So what happens to people there is they grew up with it and they're like, I want to see more Dreamcast games. Well, okay, I'll just make them. And then I can because, nobody's going to stop me. And I think that all those factors together have really led to the Dreamcast indie scene as we know it now.
And actually, it's really interesting you mentioned Feet of Fury, because a personal tangent on that. That's the one actual physical Dreamcast homebrew game I own. And I randomly was at a game store here in BC. And they had a sealed copy that had somehow just been sitting around for a while. I don't know how they got it. They don't usually carry homebrew games.
I can tell you exactly how they got it. That first game, Feet of Fury, it wasn't like the rest of the indie releases we know now, where like it's basically only sold online and it's just kind of like, we're gonna make 1,000 copies and whoever wants them come and get it. Feet of Fury coming out was a really big deal when it happened, because you have to remember at that time the Dreamcast was still technically active in Japan. And so people were like, wait a minute, there's going to be a new Dreamcast game coming out in North America. So actual retailers, like mom and pop shops especially, were actually buying copies in mass to sell because they thought this was going to be a big deal. And I know this happened here too. Like I went into various, like disc replays, which are like used music CD stores, and I went into used game stores, and they all were selling that game sealed. That's the one time that ever happened, because it did not sell to that extent, and that's why you never saw that happen again.
But I guess that does make sense, especially because back in 2003, I know the internet, I mean, it was getting more widespread, but it wasn't nearly as widespread as it is today.
You have to remember, at that point, we were only 1 year out from the Dreamcast being discontinued in North America. So it was a very different ecosystem.
Right.
Anyway, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, it's all good.
No, you're okay.
You're good. That one's interesting as well, though, because you can use the Dreamcast keyboard on it. I definitely want to actually try it out for myself sometime. My own copy, I should say. But again, it's sealed, and I don't know if I should open it at this point.
It's not a valuable game. Like, you can still pick up like sealed copies of that game for like $5. Like, I've seen them as recently as just a couple of years ago at conventions. It's just a matter of finding it now. But it's a fun game. If you like DDR, it's cool. But if you just want to keep it just to keep it, do it. But I can almost guarantee you could find another copy online. It was the most widely published one they ever made.
The one that's definitely circulated the most. That's it's a common.
Yeah, amongst the indies, yes.
When it comes to the indies and development and everything, do you know anything about like the specific tools or software or hardware or programming languages or anything that goes into making these releases? So outside of the distribution side of it, the actual like production side of it.
Not a ton. I know originally they were like Feet of Fury example used Callisto. I think it was Callisto OS, but I'm not an engineer nor am I a programmer. It's these days it's become more of a case by case basis. Like you know, they have their own specific indie tools for what they do. Some of them are just like emulated, actually. Like a lot of the Neo Geo ports that we're getting from Josh Prod are straight up they're the Neo for All emulator built by Chewy, I think is his name, CHUI, and he takes that and adds the Neo Geo CD game to it and then optimizes it specifically for that game. With the consent of the parent company who actually owns the game, and that's how some of those come to exist. But you'd have to ask literally someone like Chewy, CHUI. If you can find him, interview him. No one on this planet knows more about modern Dreamcast engineering development than that guy.
I think that's an episode idea right there, Jamie.
I think that is an episode idea. Now, one thing I think... and I know you've touched on this as well, is that for a long while, the Dreamcast got kind of this reputation as, oh, that's the shmup platform.
Yes. Yeah, that was a thing for quite some time.
What do you think kind of led to that, and what do you think finally has made it shift away from that in recent years? Has that purely just been because of the growth in new 3D Dreamcast releases in the last few years that's been moving away from that?
I would say it was a combination of factors. Like, you have to remember, as I said, even though Feet of Fury came out in 2003, you were still getting officially licensed Sega releases up until 2007, but almost every single one that came out was some sort of shoot 'em up. Because, I mean, you'd have to ask them exactly why that was, but I would assume it was mostly because shoot 'em ups are relatively easy to make and they're relatively low demand from both an engineering and marketing standpoint. And the same, let's say, bad habit carried over to the indie scene. So you were getting a lot of, and I think the game that finally broke it for everybody was Ducks. And how many times that got re-released. There was Ducks 1.0, there was Ducks 1.5, then there was Ducks 1.1, then there was Redux, and then there was Redux 1.1. And it's like 5 releases of the same game over the course of just a couple of years.
Right.
And then a lot of the indie stuff initially was shoot 'em ups, and it became like this joke that the only thing you ever got on the Dreamcast was shoot 'em ups, and then they kind of stopped selling because people were like, I've got enough of these, do something else. And you can kind of, I think, I'd have to double check on this, but I think you can kind of thank Josh Prod for that, because he started to be like, you know what, I don't want to publish shoot 'em ups, and he started just publishing like totally other random things. I mean, he was the one who brought like the first racing game over, other than Rush Rally Racing. You know, he brought 4x4 Jam over, and I know he just got the project Arcade Racing Legends completed and brought that out. I mean, that guy is kind of the MVP. He's the GOAT. He's the Jordan of you know, releasing indies for the Dreamcast now. But and even he, like, they'll do a couple of shoot 'em ups here and there, like Battle Crust or whatever, but they don't do them very much anymore because that market's kind of saturated. I think that there's still some space there, which is why he's doing like another one or two, but you have to roll it out with more variety. And that was the problem for the Dreamcast indie scene, was for like a decade, every game was a shoot 'em up, with I think really the exception of like Rush Rally Racing and like Gunlord. And like that was it. It was kind of insane.
And what I think is important to note as well is, as you said earlier, you know, with most of these games as well, for a lot of them, these were, you know, these weren't games that were getting big releases either. These were, for the most part, all very limited releases.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, so like that's the other thing that's kind of bizarre about them, is that sometimes the game would be intended for the Dreamcast from the get-go, which I always find, like Feet of Fury again, we keep citing, but like that game was built from the ground up just for that console. And you had a few oddball examples of that throughout history, but you also had a lot of games that were just kind of ported over, even though they were coming to other platforms, because the Dreamcast is easy to work with and they know it's basically free money. Provided you can do it on the cheap. But, you know, I mean, I don't know where you want to go with this specifically, but I mean, eventually that evolves into the brick wall, if you will, of hitting that when you get to games like Xenocider, where these guys were very ambitious. They wanted to make a new 3D Dreamcast game, and they tried to raise a bunch of money to do it, but the money just doesn't exist for that. So rather than get the game done in 2 years, they did it on their own time, and it took like 7 years. But they got it done. But, you know, even though they claim it's a Dreamcast indie because it was built for the Dreamcast from the ground up, you do have to wonder, like, how long until they're like, okay, well, we can also release this on other platforms and just get more money out of this, which I absolutely think they should.
No, absolutely. But I guess the one thing I do want to get from that is, despite, you know, the reputation it had as a shmup machine, and despite everything, I think it's fair to say that there's a lot of great stuff out for it now, you know, especially, and I do mean a lot comparatively speaking, because I remember running some numbers for a thing I did a while back, and the Dreamcast has seen more titles for it per year over the past few years than the Wii U.
That is correct, yeah.
Which, I mean, I know the Wii U didn't sell well either, but it's still a new-ish console.
Yeah, the Wii U only sold like 500,000 units more than the Dreamcast did, ultimately. But to be fair, I mean, Nintendo had to approve of Wii U titles and publish them themselves. That's the advantage the Dreamcast has. It doesn't answer to anybody. Anybody with an operational computer who feels like programming a game can do it. Then they can take that game to someone like Josh Prod, and if he likes the game, he will publish it. He will put it on discs. He will have it made in factories in Germany. It's always Germany, I'm telling you. And then they will be pressed, and they will be sent out to the world to be bought. Anybody who's motivated enough can do that. That's the advantage it has.
And of course, that's a timer, but I do have one last point I'd like to touch on, because we've talked about games like Ducks and Feet of Fury and 4x4 Racing. Real quick, what would you say are some of the absolute best homebrew titles out on the Dreamcast right now?
Like anything, that depends on your taste. I think some of my favorites would be Stormwind, which is a shoot 'em up, but I think it's the best one the indie scene ever produced. I think the Volgar the Viking conversion was fantastic, if you like that game. Xenocider is very good. Xenocrisis is also very good. Two very different games made by different studios. It's just kind of funny, we had two Xeno games like within 6 months of each other. I think Arcade Racing Legends, if you like racing games, is probably fantastic. It's a 3D racing game. Rush Rush Rally Reloaded, the upgraded definitive edition, if you will, of that game is good if you like those old Micro Machines games on like the Genesis or the Mega Drive, specifically if you're the UK. I know all of Europe had the Mega Drive, but the UK was where people really cared about those Micro Machines games. And then Gunlord. Gunlord is also an absolutely fantastic game. If you like 2D type of platformers or whatever, like I said, you know, you do have Volgar the Viking. Alice's Mom's Rescue is also a very good one, but it doesn't get much credit because it just looks very simplistic, but it is a lot of fun. There's a couple of RPGs if you like those. There's Pure Solar, which again, Chewy actually is the guy who converted that from the Watermelon Genesis version. That's fantastic if you like those types of games. The other one is Zia and the Goddess of Magic, which actually I'm an NPC in that game.
Oh hell yeah!
Yeah. So if you like that, you know, that's a thing. So off the top of my head, I'm not looking at any of these in front of me, so I don't have them all. I mean, I'm sure I'll think of one and be like, oh, why didn't I mention that? But those would be some of the highlights. Again, depending on your genre tastes.
No, absolutely, and just I think it's fair to say that, you know, it's a scene that, you know, there's just more games are just going to keep on coming, right?
Yeah, and I mean, I know it's not exactly the indie stuff, but I assume you guys have followed all that Atomic Wave conversion stuff.
Yes.
Yeah. Have you talked to the audience about that before?
We haven't. Sorry,
it's a perfect time.
Can you cut out for a sec? Adam?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, sorry,
there you are.
There you are. Sorry, you cut out for a sec?
Oh, I'm sorry. What was the last thing you heard me say?
Have you talked about, and then you cut out as like to the audience?
Oh, I said, can you have talked to your audience about the Atomic Wave conversions?
Yeah. All right. So the Atomic Wave was like, just talk about the Atomic Wave conversion right now.
If you want to, I'm just asking. You do whatever you want. It's your show.
Yeah, so basically, the Thomas Wave conversions, if I understand it right, the Thomas Wave was a system. It was basically an arcade system, kind of a cartridge-based-esque one. It followed. It was by Sammy, and there weren't a ton of titles for it, but I know one of the. I think one of the Metal Slug games was on it, for example. Mm-hmm. But some of those games are actually being converted to be playable on the Dreamcast, and that's the gist of it, basically, right?
Yeah, essentially the Thomas Wave boards is just a Dreamcast with a cartridge slot instead of a disk drive. That's really all it is. So this guy named Megavolt figured out how to relatively, it's not even fair to call them conversions. He's basically just kind of slightly rewriting stuff and then it becomes functional because it's just a Dreamcast. And so like you said, there's like 30 odd games that were ever released for it. There was a couple of unreleased games that have leaked online. And so this dude's just kind of meticulously working on it. And he's got most of them converted. The only issue with them is they were built with the idea of the data speed of a cartridge port as opposed to a disk drive. So it works incredibly well with things like the mode or to a lesser extent the GDMU. Most of them will not function if you say want to burn a disk of it. So it's a kind of a catch-22 because I of course would love to have physical discs of all these things. I'd love for somehow Josh Prod to get the rights and be like, all right, we're going to make Metal Slug 6 for the Dreamcast and make it officially released. But the problem is it may not even run correctly because it wasn't meant to run at that low of a load speed. So in the meantime, all I'm saying is there's now a ton of new Dreamcast games that are all very, very legit titles that are all available, again, if you have something like the mode.
And again, that's just so that's incredible. And again, you mentioned the mode and whatnot, and that again. So you're the Dreamcast expert here, and I'm still very much so learning. But that's the thing that lets you use SD on it.
So the mode is what is called the multi-optical disc emulator, and ODE stands for optical disc emulator. It's essentially the idea that you take the disc drive out of the console and replicate it with something that takes physical storage mediums like flash drives through a USB port, SD cards through an SD card slot, or a hard drive through that hard drive port. So when you do that, it essentially has a little bit of additional software on there so that the console recognizes the device. And then from there, you can basically store all your games on it and have it run off of that. The benefit is, it's essentially you have an all digital platform at that point, and so you get better load times out of it and all that sort of stuff, and just the convenience of it. For me, it's great because I have the actual collection. I've ripped all those discs myself, so I'm putting my own discs onto the hard drive within the console. But I can leave my collection alone and still play the games, but now I can play them with, better read speeds and so on and so forth.
Jamie, if you're familiar at all with the X Station for the PS1, that is a very similar idea.
Oh, okay. I think I'm...
or an EverDrive.
Sounds incredible.
Have you ever seen an EverDrive?
Or an EverDrive.
Oh, yeah, okay.
So it's essentially an EverDrive for the Dreamcast.
Okay, now that's incredible, and that's intense, and that's... Well, goodness, that's something that might even be worth another episode sometime, especially if I can look more into this and maybe get my hands on something like that.
I've done a video. Feel free to watch.
There is, yes.
There you go.
You have. I remember you have done a video, and I have a YouTube backlog, admittedly, right now. But.
So that's a funny thing about when you make YouTube videos and you mention something like that. People are like, I swear I'm gonna watch it. I promise. No, it's fine. Nobody's sitting here being like, you have to watch my video, or otherwise you're disloyal. I don't care. Do whatever you want to do.
Yeah. It's like the YouTube mafia. You gotta watch the vid, or
Tell me, have you watched the video? You're gonna be in trouble if you don't watch the video.
Gotta watch the vid, or someone's gonna get their kneecaps broken.
Somebody's knees are gonna get busted if they don't watch my video.
Oh my god. Jamie, it's like when I released the Club Penguin video, people are like, I'm going to watch it. I haven't watched it. And I'm just like, please don't. It's not great.
I mean, I thought it was pretty good.
It's something.
I enjoyed it.
We should wrap it up, shall we?
Yes. Adam, once again, thank you so much for coming on and talking Dreamcast. and Homebrew, and listen to me ramble.
Yeah, no problem. Now please go watch all my videos so we don't have a problem. I don't want us to be having a problem. You know what I'm saying?
Please don't hurt my family.
Well, then watch my
Right
video
away,
and your
Don
family
Koralik.
might be okay. That's all I'm saying.
Yes, thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you so much once again.
Yes. Once again, where can people find you online?
Adam Koralik, my name. You can find me on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Patreon, Discord. I'm all over the place.
Excellent. And seriously, check Adam out. Whether you're into video game console cleaning, restoration videos, or literally the only pickup videos I actually enjoy watching on YouTube right now, fun fact. Or
It's true.
Thank you.
yeah. Or really, if you want one of the best complete resources on one of the things I think is a lot of people sleep on is absolutely your video game console generation recap series. I think is especially fantastic.
Thank you.
I routinely binge it.
I appreciate that. Yeah, how odd is it when you go from like the older ones and then like I find a newer console and then you have to like they kind of fit in between. Have you ever done that? Do you know what I'm talking about?
I know.
Yeah,
you're
where you have to like
about.
squeeze it in as like a 0.5 episode.
Yeah, how does that feel like actually watching it as a playlist? Because I don't do that, so I don't know how like bizarre it feels.
One thing that I've like really loved about your channel is that it's so consistent with like same set and vibe, but with higher production. So really the only difference is just like, oh, this video is newer and with better production and gear and experience and all that stuff. So there's not really like a huge like lurch when you go from watching the older episodes and then all of a sudden there's a newer one.
It's good. I'm
Yeah,
glad to
and
hear
the
it.
thing is if I'm watching in a playlist, whenever you do like a 0.5 episode, or I think you even had to do like a 0.7 or 0.8 at times, you always acknowledge that in the video itself, like at the beginning and end, which leads to it actually, to me at least, flowing really well. Like it
Good, that was
flows
the goal.
really well with the
Yeah.
playlist.
Well, thank you, because I've never actually got that feedback before, so it's good to know.
Yeah, because again, like if you just done it and like not acknowledged it, it probably would have stuck out. I would have been like, did he use like a different camera for this one or something? But again, you acknowledge it and it makes it very very bingeable.
Cool. Thank you.
Very bingeable.
Yes.
So, Jamie, where can people find you and I?
Well, people can find us at Stuff We Play, youtube.com/Stuff We Play, because Speedrun is part of Stuff We Play, and you can listen to Speedrun itself on speedrun.podbean.com. So I had to look it up.
I was gonna say you hesitated there.
Yeah, speedrun.podbean.com, or on Apple Podcasts, or the Podbean app, or Spotify, or any other major podcast app at Speedrun. You can also find Stuff We Play, me, on Twitter, at Stuff We Play, or message me directly at jamie@stuffweplay.com with podcast ideas, or also to Jazzie at stuffweplay.com. I don't know why I'm suddenly also scatterbrained and stuff. I think it's just I think that's just the impact that having your kneecaps broken over YouTube does.
Yes, you better get your shit together. I don't want to have to come after your damn kneecaps. I'm very lazy.
No, before Don Koralik claps you in the shins again.
That's
All
right.
I'm saying
Who are we
is
sponsored by?
First, I forgot to watch the Don's videos, and I stole his meatball recipe. So, it's
Oh,
awful.
that's not good. You don't want to be doing that.
But Speedrun is brought to you in part by Podbean. Podbean hosts our podcast and puts it out on all the different platforms. And if you would like some paid hosting of your own, then go to podbean.com/speedrun or use the code speedrun at checkout to help us get stuff done, get that production value up. Also support us via Patreon, patreon.com/stuffweplay. And Jazzie, this podcast was edited by you. Excellent. So with that, Adam, once again, thank you tons for coming on.
Thank you for having me. Don't make it a mistake.
Of course.
We don't want to have a problem. That's all I'm saying. We just don't want to have no problems.
Oh my god.
Oh my. Oh they.
All right, Jamie, take us home.
All right. I've been Jamie.
I've been Jazzie.
And thank you very
Sorry.
much for listening. Huh?
No, you're okay.
No, you're all good.
I was about to say
promise.
thank you, but no, thank you.
You are welcome.
Adam,
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
And thank you all very much for listening. Stay classy, and I'll see you next time.
You'll be sleeping with the fishes.
That's right. I'm gonna get to some concrete galoshes.